and I'm just going to go, remind him he's going to hell, like he's bad guy. And I start praying and I'm like, God, I'm so angry with my husband.
Before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of those who have donated to this channel. If you don't know, you can go to faithandfailures.com, sign up for our newsletter. You can get weekly updates on our weekly blogs, new episodes that come out, and discounts and new items that show up in our merch store. Also, if you're a part of Facebook, we also have a Facebook group. It is called Faith and Failures, just like the podcast, where over 200 people are talking about real topics, their daily struggles, questions about God, real things that we struggle with that we don't always get the chance to talk about in church. So if you get a chance, go check it out. All right, let's get started. So today with me, I have a local writer. Now, did you become a part of the Facebook group? Who invited you? How'd you find out about it?
Megan.
Okay. She came on the show.
Yes. So she got my book and read it, and then she was like, "Oh my goodness, you need to connect with this group." And so
Awesome.
Here I am.
Well, very cool. And so you're from Bullard.
Yes.
Now, were you born and raised there?
No. So I was born and raised in upstate New York.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Actually, I was kind of I say I was raised upstate New York. That's the longest one-time place I lived.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I lived all over. But we've been in East Texas, Bullard.
Were you a military kid?
No, I was drama family kid.
Oh. Isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, that's cool.
Not quite as noble as military, but
Now, you said New York was the longest, but was that your favorite place to live?
It was beautiful. So we are Texans through and through, though. So the Texan heart in me says that Texas is the
Right.
best.
No matter what.
No matter what,
Nothing can measure up. Yeah.
Nothing can measure up to Texas.
Well, that's cool. So now, did you always write?
No.
How'd you get into that?
So honestly, it sounds pretty cliche, but I never had a desire to be an author. Wrote a few poems here and there, and spill my mind on social media when I want to, but never really had a desire to write. But the Lord just told me one day, "You're going to write your story," and I thought, "You are crazy, God," and but here I am. I did. And it was published this past December.
And that's what this is, right?
That's what that
is.
is.
So this is your first book?
My first book.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, today we are with BJ Garrett. We're going to be talking about her book, and it's her first book. It's called Unwanted No More, From Exploited to Embraced by God. So this is your story.
It's my story.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that scary to actually...
It was horrible. Yeah. It was so scary. I mean, I wish I could be like, no, I loved it. It was so fantastic. It was awful.
Really?
And my poor husband, I mean, he would just come home and I would just be like, just days of just sitting up with my laptop and just bawling my eyes out and crying. And he would come in and he's just like, I think I'll go start the grill. And I'm like, okay, go start the grill. Like, no, just go away.
I don't mean to laugh at your expense, but so this is kind of blood, sweat, and tears type deal.
Yeah, very much.
Wow.
So, yeah, it took well over a decade to actually get to fruition. I knew the Lord had told me to write the story, and I had begun to speak and tell my story publicly pretty often, and with the ministry that I work for, I get that opportunity quite a bit.
So what's the ministry? Because everything you mentioned, I want to cite in the show notes.
Sure, absolutely. It's Christ-Centered Abortion Recovery and Education, and it's CARE.
Okay.
And so I get to do that pretty regularly. But the thought of, I mean, I don't know. You think if you speak your story, then why not just write it?
Yeah.
But it's a whole different level of vulnerability, I think.
Yeah.
And whereas, like, for instance, I could say, this happened, whatever, when I was 12 or 13. But to then describe that in detail and take the reader on that journey with me, it was awful. Like, I'm not even kidding. It was pretty brutal.
So was it because you felt God told you to do it, or like what pushed you to where you were, okay, I'm going to do this finally? Like what was the moment?
Okay, so it's kind of, not to just drag it out, but it really, I mean, when God first told me to write the story, I started writing, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like I'm obeying God. Yay. And then it got hard. So I would close it. And so this kind of happened progressively over about 10 years. And then one day I was at lunch with a friend, Karen Ingram, and she said, just randomly, maybe 5 people in my whole circle of friends knew about the book at all. And she just randomly said, hey, where are you at with your book? And of course I had a string of excuses and I'm like, oh, Karen, I don't want to talk about it. And then 3 days later, she showed up with a brand new laptop and said, you have a year, write your story. I believe in you. Whoa. And so I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, now I have to.
Now I have to. And so then right after that, I had kind of like just the base manuscript done. And I just started over because I knew it wasn't a book. It had no chapters. It was basically like a 30-page paragraph. Yeah. So I just started back at the very beginning from that moment, and I just started doing it. Well, then I found out that I was going to a conference for speakers to, get better at it and learn, kind of like CEUs for speakers. Yeah. And there was going to be a publisher there. And they're like, bring your author one sheet. And this, I'm like, I don't even know what an author one sheet is. And so I started Googling. I'm like, there's no way I'm leaving in like 3 days. And so my friend Karen, again, I didn't have a printer, nothing. Like I was so, nothing. Yeah. And she printed out the first 2 chapters that I had redone. And she said, at least take this with you. And so I did. At the speakers conference, the publisher got to hear my story, hear me speak my story. And she said, we're going to do this. Oh, and wow. I signed my contract a few days later, and 9 months later, there it is.
Now, where can people find this?
You can find it at basically any online store, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Redemption Press, which is the publisher, local, or well, not even local. I keep them in stock, so if people want signed copies, I can, mail them to them.
$25 a pop.
Close.
Yeah, I get $5 of that for.
yeah. Finder's fees.
We'll do a business deal here.
Yeah, let's work it out.
So, do you mind kind of sharing the story?
I don't mind at all. Where do you want me to start?
It's the beginning.
Okay, well,
I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, really, I just kind of I grew up, kind of poor, white family. My mom and dad were never married, and my mom, so I mean, kind of a spoiler alert, but my mom finds Jesus at the end. But there's a long road to get to there, and she made a lot of really unhealthy choices in parenting. If you're a parent out there in, podcast land or YouTube land, you can relate. We all make bad choices, but she made some really unhealthy choices and put me in some pretty tough situations with men specifically. And
now, was it drug related?
Not really, no. Just more financial related. So we didn't have money for a light bill, so here's my daughter. We didn't have money for water, so here's my daughter. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you've heard my Meth to Minister, but I had a cop friend, and he was trying to talk me out of doing meth, pretty much, and he was saying, you don't understand this world. And I had been in it a little bit, but he was talking about, like, people would trade their kids for drugs. Yeah. That's why I asked if it was a drug thing, because, and I can't even imagine, like, the psychological level of, like, how that can be okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And to put your kid through that, I mean, you're one of the kids.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. But God is so good because he won't waste any of that if you allow him. Yeah. And so, again, like I'm finally to a season of my life, 45 years later, where I can say, thank you, God, for all of this, because I can look back and see his hand in it and how he's able to use it now. But I mean, even 10 years ago, I couldn't thank God for my story. I mean, really? It was times where
this is all kind of fresh and new that you...
Very, yeah. Wow. For sure. Even though, I mean, for years, I've been in full-time ministry for many years, for, gracious, almost 19 years, I guess, in full-time ministry. But even through that, just seasons of being angry with God and just wondering, why did you allow these things? Like, you're God, so you can protect little children. Yeah. But he didn't choose to protect me. But in some ways he really did. But ultimately it's not about him not protecting me. It's that we live in a fallen world and there are sinners. And when you sin, sometimes your sin has consequences that affect other people. Yeah. Horrible people had access to me and they did horrible things. And that was not because God wasn't still God or that he wasn't good. It was because there were sinners doing really bad things, and an innocent little child got hurt in the process.
Yeah.
So,
how much of the book do you want to give away? Like story-wise or...
I'm good with whatever. But basically, that was just kind of the beginning. It's just lots of ugly stuff. Bad decision after bad decision. I got pregnant at 14 with my live-in boyfriend. And at that point
Now, your mom didn't find Jesus at that time? Like, how was it? Way later? So you were just being echoes of what was shown to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned really young that, this is a Christian podcast, but sex sells, and sex is how I learned to get validated.
Right.
And so,
or get what you want.
Or get what I want. Exactly.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so I began to use my body to get what I wanted. And so at 14, I ended up pregnant. And that really, I was headed down a really, really long, horrible path of destruction with sex, sex and drugs and drinking all the time. And I got pregnant. And so it was like, oh, I got to stop because I'm going to be a mom. And that, ironically, I took that very, very seriously. And I had no idea what a really good mom looked like. Yeah. But I had a good example of a bad mom. And so my idea was if I just did everything opposite of what my mom did, then I could be a good mom. And it was almost like, the beginning of my path. I say that, but then I still made terrible decisions. I was a baby. Yeah. I was a baby with a baby.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but I did. I was a mom. 5 days after I turned 15, I became a mom for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah. So...
Happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is crazy.
It like I have a 21-year-old now, and I can't even imagine her kissing a boy, much less being a mom.
Like you're not supposed to be thinking about boys till you're 36.
I know, right? So,
wow. Yeah,
but I was a mom, and so I got married to her father, and our marriage didn't last, and we were babies, and I don't fault him for that. He was young and dumb and made bad decisions, drugs, playing the field with women quite a bit, and doing what young guys do. What young guys do, and so that was our life. But our marriage didn't last, and next thing you know, I was in another relationship, and this time I got pregnant again, and he didn't want to be a dad, and I was completely heartbroken in that. And so when he asked me. He didn't really ask me to have an abortion, but he just didn't want to be a dad. Yeah. And when he said those words to me, all I could think in that moment was a time in my life when my dad, in a complete drunken rage, spit in my face and told me he wished I had never been born. And so when this man who I was so desperately in love with said he didn't want this child, all I could think is there is no way I will bring this child into a world and feel even for a moment the way I felt my whole life is unwanted. And so we drove to Dallas, and that's when I had my first abortion.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did he stay after that?
No. Yeah.
Let that be a lesson to you listening or watching that it's manipulation. Do not fall for it.
Please don't.
There's so many other ways I've had a few podcasts about abortion. I'm pro-life all the way.
Yeah.
Like there's so many other options.
There's so many other options. And the reality is if a guy is telling you to take the life of your child, he's not worth being with.
No, not at all.
He's just not worth being with.
No.
And so, and I know that now. And women choose abortion for all kinds of reasons. Right. And I work in abortion recovery now, and I help women to hopefully not make that choice, but to heal from the choice if they've already made it in their past. But the reality is abortion destroyed my life. Leading up to that, nothing could compare. The child abuse, the sexual abuse, the being sold for a bag of groceries when I was 12 years old, none of that can compare to the damage that happened with abortion. Wow. A piece of me died that day. Besides my child that died, a piece of my heart was taken as well. So
now you said first abortion. Did that mean you had another one?
I did.
Really?
Yeah. Which is, the thing about abortion is, it destroys. There's just no other way around it. Yeah. But once you've had an abortion, the self-destructive behaviors that naturally come from that often lead to promiscuity, which leads to more unplanned pregnancies.
Yeah.
And you got rid of the first one, the first one that I had, I was heartbroken. I loved my baby. I truly thought, in a weird, awful way, I thought I was protecting my baby from pain by taking its life.
Yeah.
Which is not true. It's awful, but I chose abortion to protect his life. For my second abortion, I was wrapped up in full-blown sex industry. I was selling my body on a stage for money, and I got pregnant by a guy. We were somewhat in a relationship, but he was really just a money guy, to be honest. And you can't be pregnant and work in the sex industry.
No, doesn't sell that well.
Doesn't sell so good. And, the clothes don't fit quite so well. And, it just doesn't look good on the stage. So this time, by this point, though, like, you have to understand, like, I had for, the next 3 years from the first abortion to this point, complete self-sabotage. Yeah. I mean, trying to really punish myself for
so it was
choice.
Due to the first abortion.
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. Just self-sabotage, numbing myself any way that I could. Yeah. And you can't be pregnant and work in the sex industry, bottom line. And so there was never a thought of having this child. I had no desire to be with the dad to this day, almost, 27 years later. He has no clue that I was ever even pregnant. We're not in the same circles or anything anymore. And so, I just called up a friend and I said, hey, I need to go to Dallas. And she said, okay. She drove me to Dallas. We didn't speak going there. We didn't speak coming home. And within 3 weeks, I was back on the stage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's...
I know. I mean,
that was intense fast. Like,
yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And that's all in here?
It's all in there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And, I mean, obviously a little more, details with it, but, and the kind of the heartache, that followed through that.
Now, you said you're married now, right?
I am.
Okay. So what was the path where the second abortion happened? And then where did you start? Was it a while, or was it kind of slow fade into Jesus? Like, how did that come about where you found where you are now?
Yeah. So, God never stopped pursuing me. Mm-hmm. And in the book, and I talk a little bit, even with the ugliness of my upbringing, we were always in church. So I kind of always learned, when you're in trouble, you go to church. Yeah. And, so we were kind of that family. My mom would take me, and if we needed something paid, she would go to a church and say, hey, we need our light bill, and take me in, little scraggly little ragamuffin. Yeah. And I was the bait, and, but I learned, one, I never want to ask a church for anything, but two, when you're in trouble, you go to church. And somehow that just stuck with me, and praise God it did. Yeah. Because I had gotten married to my husband, Garrett, and we were not believers. If you had asked us, we'd have both been like, well, yeah, we believe in God, duh, like God's God, like we're Christians.
You're from Texas, of course you believe in God.
We're from Texas, we believe in God, God, guns, and freedom. Like, yeah. But we were lost. We were so lost. And, so here we are, just living life as, sinning saints, I guess. And we had a house fire. It just sounds like an Oprah show, man. But like, it was just like all this, like we have sex industry and abortions and house fires. But we lost everything to a house fire.
This is a movie.
Yeah, it is. Like, sign me up, Hallmark. But so we had a house fire. We lost everything. And what happened, though, because of that, is that led us to rent a mobile home across the street from a little small country Baptist church right here in Bullard, Texas. And ironically, the same friend that drove me to Dallas for my second abortion, we're good friends. And to this day, still, we don't talk about the abortion, but we're still friends. And she said, BJ, you need to go to church. And I was like, you know what? Oh, my goodness, you're right. So ironically, in this weird season of just being desperate, hitting rock bottom, our marriage was on shaky ground, to say the least. Yeah. I would go back to the sex industry anytime we needed money. My husband hated it, but like I didn't give him permission.
But he stayed with you.
He stayed with me. Yeah, he didn't leave.
Wow, that's big.
Oh, yeah.
My wife talked about this. She's like, I don't understand how these people have open marriages. Yeah. I would kill you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it's like, to me, it's like, it's it just makes me cringe.
It's
so
awful.
The fact that y'all stayed together is a God thing in
It
itself.
is a God thing. God truly protected our marriage. And I talk about that some in the book too. Like there is zero earthly reason why we should be married, much less even like each other today. He's amazing and he loves the Lord so much today. But we survived that. But I ended up at this little Baptist church, and I just was so hungry for God, and really just desperate. So it wasn't very long at all, and I thought I was a Christian. So like it sounds so wonky, but literally like I'd been going for a few weeks, and I had some of my new coworkers had first invited me to church, and so I'm like, well, how do you join the church? And they're like, well, you just go down and go forward and da-da-da. And so I'm like, okay, well, I think I'm going to join the church. So I go down to join the church, and like, I think I'm Christian. And so he's like, I'm like, hey, I just need to join the church. And he's like, well, do you need to be baptized? Well, I'm thinking, well, duh. Because again, thinking from my upbringing, every time my mother would take us to a new church, we would get baptized and like join the church. So I think how you join a church is to get baptized. So I'm like, well, duh, yeah, I got to get baptized. And so, which I know now, really, you just get
this
baptized.
guy doesn't know how to do
it. He doesn't know how to do his job. Like, what am I doing here? But what happened in that, and again, this is just how God doesn't let any detail go, is because I had said I needed to be baptized, that prompted the pastor to lead me through just a simple sinner's prayer. Mm-hmm. And I just remember when I was praying those words, it was as if I was just begging God to be real. And he was.
That's awesome.
So a few weeks later, I got baptized. And like, I know baptism is a symbolic, thing we do in obedience of burying the old us and raising up the new us in Christ. But I'm telling you, when I was baptized, it was like I could physically feel all of those disgusting things that I had ever done or that had ever been done to me completely washed away. Wow. And when I was raised up, like I just get chill bumps now. When I was raised up, I was a brand new creature in Christ. And it was beautiful. And I didn't know what had happened because, again, like I'm still thinking I was already a Christian, but I was different.
What is this?
What is this? Yeah, like it was so wild. But I was so hungry for God. Yeah. And like I finally began to realize like, oh, I was like not saved. Like I was going to hell. Oh no, my husband's not saved. He's going to hell. And so like I got super obsessed with trying to get my husband to church. And
so he didn't go with you this whole time?
No,
was just you?
It was just me.
Oh, okay. Now, was he raised up around church at all? Or?
He was. Ironically, his grandfather was a Baptist minister here in East Texas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he grew up again in the faith, you know, in the church often. Again, we knew all the answers. Like I never remember not believing that Jesus was the Son of God. But I'm telling you, I was not a Christian. Right. I knew the right answers. Right. But they were not personal.
Had all the knowledge, but none of the heart stuff.
All head knowledge. And to transform head knowledge to heart knowledge, I can't explain how that happens, but it does. And it did.
Find that preacher and let him baptize.
I know,
like, hey,
that's right.
He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing. He did know how to do his job. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Lord. But
how hard was it to come to church for him?
It was pretty hard because again, we had both had some not great history in the church, and so yeah, it was pretty hard. But really and truly, so like initially, I was just like obsessive, naggy. You gotta go to church. You gotta go to church, and it wasn't working. Surprisingly, I don't know why, because
it always works with us. I don't know.
I know, but finally one day I'll never forget. He was working at the Tea Room in Bullard. He was building that big waterfall back there, and he was supposed to come to church with me. It was a Sunday, and he didn't. He stood me up, and I was just so angry. And I'm driving, and I'm just going to go, remind him he's going to hell, like he's bad guy. And I started praying, and I'm like, God, I'm so angry with my husband. I need you. I remember I was like, God, I'm so angry, but I don't want to be angry. And I was like, well, that's kind of a lie. I want to be angry, but I need you to change my heart. Yeah. And like all of a sudden, it was so creepy, but super cool. Like just this crazy peace just washed all over me. And I wasn't mad. Like I was genuinely not mad at my husband. And I showed up and I was just like, hey, babe, and he was just like, who are you? And, but from that point on, he began to see a difference in me. He began to see Jesus in
Yeah.
me. And I was able to love him like scripture teaches me to love him. And I had amazing role models that God placed in my life of godly women that began to teach me how to love my husband and how to respect my husband, which was completely foreign to me.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I think I'll go to church with you. And so he began to go. And next thing you know, I mean, there was not a dry eye in that church when he went forward to accept Christ on that one special Sunday morning.
That's awesome.
And so now here we are. We serve in ministry together, and he's a gunsmith. He loves to work on guns. And
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So now you said you're in ministry and you've been doing it for 19 years now. What specific is it? The care ministry, or is it other things? Like how many things do you have your hands in?
Okay, so right now I mostly only have my hand in the care ministry. But leading up to that, I initially started out with youth ministry. So again, God is comical. He has such a sense of humor. But I had got placed on a youth pastor search committee at the church where we got saved. Well, I couldn't you know how God just kind of keeps whispering to you in these like still small voices, and I kept thinking like, God, I don't even like teenagers. Why do you keep having me do this? I had a teenager at the time. My oldest daughter was a teenager. And I'm like, God, I mean, I dropped out of school in the 8th grade. Like, I have no education. I've had 2 abortions.
Really?
There's no reason why God should allow me to do this. So I'm thinking, like, I'm fighting with God for months. I'm like, you've lost your mind. It's not supposed to be me, but I will help find the right person. And then finally one day I was just visiting with the pastor that led me to the Lord. And I said, I think I'm supposed to teach the youth. And he said, well, I'm glad you finally answered the call. I've known it was you. And so that's where I started in youth ministry.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
now,
so I've done.
Has your husband been helping you? Or?
So he has always supported me in everything that the Lord has always done. He's always been beside me, but he is more a behind the scenes kind of guy. And he loves people individually, but he does not teach. We got to go to Africa, and he got to, it was amazing. Just to, God.
What part?
We were in Kampala, Uganda.
Okay, I went to Swaziland in South Africa.
I was supposed to go to Swaziland the next year, but that trip fell through. But I love Africa.
It was life-changing. Like, we went to one house, and it was weird. Not every house, but the houses that they look like shacks on the outside.
Yeah.
But they would have, like, tile floors and big screen TVs inside. I'm like, where did I just step into? It was weird. And then we went to this house, and this lady, because they have, they live on hills, and they would zigzag on paths, so it wouldn't be a straight shot up or down. And this lady would carry her 30-year-old son because he had AIDS and his face was just bandaged up and all that. She would put him on his back and carry him to the clinic. Wow. And so that was one reason we were there, to get a clinic closer, because she was going, I don't even know how far, on foot to take her son to the clinic. Wow. And it was just, it was life-changing.
I love Africa, and I pray that the Lord allows us to go back someday. When we were there, people would say, oh, have you always prayed to come to Africa? I'm like, I didn't even know, to do that. like it was never even in my wildest dreams, but God surpasses our wildest dreams if we just allow him and join the ride with him. So, he's always allowed me to do whatever God calls me to do in ministry.
Is he a quiet person?
He's more quiet than I am. Unless you're talking about guns, like him and guys and guns, like he can talk all day long. Yeah. But I'm really the jabbermouth of the family.
It's the opposite with me and my wife. She's the quiet one, and I'm the one that won't shut up.
Yeah. God has to balance us out.
He does. Like, I say to her all the time that she's my anchor and I'm her wings. Yeah. Like, that's just the way that it works. Like, I push her to get out there, and she pulls me back because I won't shut up.
Yeah. I can so relate to that. But yeah, my husband, he's seriously the best guy. When we got married, I had 2 kids. And
so after the 2 abortions, then you had 2 more
so
kids?
I had one child abortion, another child abortion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So sorry. For the real details, you got to get the book. No. But
don't want to give away too much.
Don't give away too much. No, I'm just kidding. I'm an open book. I'll share it all. But so he married me with 2 kids, and I mean, he's loved them and raised them completely as his own.
That's kind of how it is with me and my wife. I've been married before, and she came into the picture when he was maybe 5, 6, and he's going to be 12 in November.
Yeah.
So he's been living with us for the past 3 years.
Awesome.
So she's been like a real full-time mom.
Yeah.
So it's been an adjustment.
Yeah.
Because she went from single living with their parents until we got married, and then we were married for a couple of years, and then on came the kid full-time, and so it was definitely so she understands that kind of, and she's taken that role on.
Yeah.
Which was, you're worried about it a little bit when you have a child.
Yeah.
And somebody who it's not their child.
Absolutely.
But she's just stepped into the role, just like, if you don't, and she's got a little mom finger going.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's a blessing for sure. But so now, in this whole time that you kind of mapped out, from being 12 and the way that you were done to the where you are now, have you kept in contact with your parents?
So both of my parents are gone now.
Mm-hmm.
They're both deceased. They both died of cancer. My
Both?
dad, both.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man.
My dad actually 10 years ago, 11 years ago, this past just like a few days ago, and then my mother before that. But so I had cut off communication with them completely for quite a while, and honestly, right before my mom died, my sister, who I'm still super close to today, I mean, she's my best friend. She's my rock. But she called me and she said, you need to go see Mom. And this was before I was a Christian. And I said, I don't want to go. She can die and go to hell for all I care. What I didn't know is in the midst of that, she had come to know the Lord and had truly repented from the life she had led and led us through. And
that was the one sister all that you had?
So I have one sister, and then I have 3 brothers that were my father's sons, but I don't know them. So they were never part of my life. Only my sister.
Was your sister treated the same way you were?
So I really try not to tell my sister's story. We have different paths, and we lived together for a lot of our life, and a lot of our life we didn't, because, we different homes and different families would take us at different times. I live with my dad sometimes, and so I really try to leave her. She's not quite as the blabbermouth that I am, and she likes to keep her privacy.
Don't want to tell her business.
Yeah. So, but we were sisters, and she protected me a lot.
Yeah.
And then she actually struggles with a lot of guilt from when she couldn't protect me.
Yeah.
She was also a child. She couldn't.
Right.
But
what can you do? You're the child.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. So.
Sorry to mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
You were talking about she came to know the Lord.
Yeah. So, so anyways, the Lord gave me the last week of my mom's life to be with her. I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, who's now 21. And the Lord just, I can't take credit. I didn't understand at the time, but he just allowed me to forgive her. And, I'm so grateful because I really got to see and be with my mom and truly experience a mom that I knew loved me.
The new version. The God version. That's awesome.
Yeah. And just truly forgive her. And again, I wasn't a Christian, so I didn't recognize that until many years later. But once I came to know the Lord and experience my own forgiveness for all of the things I had done. And part of that includes hating my mom. Like, I hated my mom.
Yeah.
I say I hated, but that is such a minor description of how I felt. I despised everything about my mom. I literally wanted her to die and go to hell. And I believe in a fiery hell, even at that time. Like, I wanted her to go there. I hated her. And you should never want anybody to go there.
But that's what you thought justice was. I mean, that would be justified to you.
It was.
Yeah.
And, but God allowed me this awesome gift of forgiving my mom before I even understood what that meant. And, so then, I don't know, a few years later, I have Alex. She's my baby. She's about 3, and just randomly, she didn't know my dad and had never been around him. And she just randomly coming home from my in-laws one day said, "Mom, is your dad still alive?" And I said, "Honestly, babe, I don't know." And she said, "Well, don't you think you should find out?" And I was like, "I don't know. That's weird."
Don't you think you should
I know.
find out?
She's got her sassy from her mama. So I kid you not, I'm changing out laundry. This is just a few hours that same day. My phone rings, and it was my dad. And he broke down on the phone, and he said that he's sorry for all the things that he's done and allowed. And if it's not too late, he wants to be a dad and know my kids and his grandkids. And
now,
so,
were you a Christian at that time?
I was a Christian at that time.
So you reckon,
so
thank you. You started doing
yeah, I was like, woo, get a little Pentecostal up in here. But I mean, it was crazy. It was so crazy. And so, of course, I'm just bawling, at this point. And so I'm like, of course, it's not too late. And so my husband and I went out to dinner that night. I didn't bring my kids. My dad was pretty sad that I didn't bring my kids because he wanted to see them.
Yeah.
But again, I was unsure. I mean, like,
oh yeah, you got to test the ground first.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
what's going on.
Yeah.
So kind of to summarize a little bit, my dad shortly thereafter he should have died. He had his guts burst inside of him, and he was found days later and really should not have survived. Hours-long surgery. They had to.
So they found him days later, and he was still alive.
He was still alive.
Wow.
And survived a very, very long, like 10-hour surgery of cleaning out his insides from all of the gross stuff.
Wow.
Literally should not have lived, but he did because God had not saved him yet. And not that I don't believe that God is going to save everybody this way, but he did choose to save my parents. And that night, my pastor at that time, a different pastor that led us to the Lord, but a pastor we were serving in ministry with, went to the hospital and led my dad to the Lord that night. And so then I had about 2.5, 3 years with a dad that loved Jesus. And I got to watch him. He was very sick the whole time. Yeah. Couldn't do a whole lot, but I got to watch him be changed from the inside out. And like, I'm pro-church. I love church. I've served in church. If you don't have a local church, get a local church that believes the Bible. Mm-hmm. But my dad never stepped foot into the church from the day he got saved until the day that he died. But I watched God transform him from the inside out because it was the Holy Spirit that does the work.
Oh, yeah.
And and my kids got to know him, and they had 3 years almost of a godly grandfather. So
that is awesome.
It was
just that in itself is another story.
Yeah, I know. I've actually sharing my story publicly. I've had women that have come up to me and said, "I just can't believe how could you forgive him?" I'm like, you don't understand how good forgiveness is. Yeah. Like I believe that God had allowed me, just like my mom, he had allowed me to forgive my dad. I didn't think he would ever be a part of my life again. Definitely not my kid's life. I mean, I'm not going to call him up to babysit my little girl. My dad was one of my primary abusers growing up. And so, obviously he's not going to be my top babysitter.
Right.
But he was allowed to be supervised, and I watched him love my kids.
That's so cool.
It was really cool. That was God.
And that's just a taste of what God can do.
Yeah.
He's so awesome and gracious.
Yeah.
Now so what is the end? What now is it? What the order you just gave it? Is that how the book is? Or is it?
It's mostly that way. Like, I mean, it kind of starts from the beginning and goes to the end, with a few twists and turns. But yeah, I mean, it kind of walks through the journey.
Because my wife, I've told her, because she's a lot smarter than I am, and I've told her, I said she needs to do a blog or do a book, something. Yeah. Because I think she really could. Yeah. And she saw this book and she just picked it up. She didn't even open it or anything. She's like, and we're the same profile, and she's like, "Is this the lady you've been talking to who's going to do the podcast?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "I want to read this book." She didn't even know anything about it. She's like, "Man, I just want to read this book."
That's awesome.
And so, if you're listening today, we are giving away a signed copy of Unwanted No More, From Exploited to Embraced by God. So it'll be posted on YouTube as well as in the show notes, and we will start that giveaway next week. You can sign up for that. So now, sharing your story is tough. Yeah. Like you said in the beginning, it was hard for you to write it. And I'm assuming because you did it, you would encourage someone else who has this story or has a story to really share it with others.
Absolutely.
What effects have you seen in the wake of you really writing this, like, and then speaking and having the opportunities to do all, like, what can they benefit from it?
Well, instantly from the very first time, I mean, for instance, and I share about this in the book, the very first time, so my husband didn't actually know my story when we got married for years, even after we were Christians. So the Lord first began to tell me, you've got to tell him. And I was like, Lord, I can't. Yeah. If he knows how disgusting I am from the things that were done to me and the things that I chose to do, he will leave. Yeah. And I just couldn't bear the thought of telling him, anybody, what I had done and or what had been done to me. And really, it just got to where, I mean, my husband's just this gentle giant. He's 6'6", 300 pounds, but he's just like, he would come by and he would just touch my shoulder, and I would just cringe. Like, all of a sudden it was like these smells and these touches was taking me back to when I was a little girl. Yeah. And Satan was just really wreaking havoc in our marriage, and he didn't know. Did
he feel something was?
Oh, absolutely. Like, he's like, why can't I touch my wife? I mean, not even really being intimate or anything like that. It was just, I was repulsed by him. Because all of a sudden when he would touch me, it was like he wasn't him. Yeah. What I know now is, and again, I don't blame God for making me feel gross, because that's not what God does. But he allowed my memories to resurface, and he began to use those so that I had to tell my husband. Yeah. So finally, I just broke down one day. I got a babysitter for the kids, and I was like, we've got to talk. And so he comes in, and I'm like ugly crying, man. And I'm not one of those pretty little dainty criers. Like, there's not a lot dainty about me anyways. I'm like snot slinging, gross, crying. And my husband's like, what is going on? And so I just began to tell him everything, including a relationship I had gone outside of before we were married, while we were dating. And I just told him everything. And
did you ever ask him what was going through his head when he came in the room when you were crying?
I don't know. Like, I think he was just so shocked. Like, what is going on?
If it was me, I'd have been like, okay, this lady's something happened. She's about to leave me or something.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure.
There's something going on.
Absolutely. But he just, really, I had to get to a point where I was like, okay, God, even if he leaves, you're enough. Yeah. I trust you to protect me and to provide for me, even if he leaves. But oh my gracious, he just embraced me and he just loved me so stinking completely. And God completely healed our love and our marriage in that moment. And it was spectacular.
Now, was it a process between y'all to get, or was it like kind of an immediate thing?
It was pretty immediate. I mean, sometimes I think God heals immediately, and sometimes it is a process. For us. That was a complete immediate.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was instant. So, and that was, oh gracious, that was probably 17 or 18 years ago, I guess, when that happened. Maybe a little longer. No, it was, let's see, Alex was 3. So maybe 14 years ago when that happened.
See, I feel like in the desert's where we learn to thirst. That kind of mentality. So you never would have known what that kind of level of love is if you never would have went through all that.
Absolutely.
And I feel that it's hard to see that and understand it when you're in the middle of it. Yeah. But when you look back, you can see God's hand the entire time. Yeah. You are still alive. Absolutely. You could have ended up dead somewhere or in a ditch. There's all kinds of other paths that things could have went a lot worse than what they did.
Well, I say that all the time. There is zero reason why I shouldn't be a washed up crackhead, whore, prostitute in a ditch somewhere. Yeah. That should have been my life. That was the path I was on because of the things that had happened in my life. That was the path I was on, and I was on it. Yeah. Like, I was living that life. And God just reached down and snatched me and rescued me. And then he did that to my husband. And what a beautiful life. Like, I really don't want to sound, real braggy or whatever, because I'm just a sinner saved by grace. Yeah. But God has given us such a beautiful life. And it's all because of him. He's forgiven me from so much ugly.
Yeah, that's why I'm so grateful for my wife. And having the ability to do this kind of stuff, like a podcast where it gives people a platform to share their story and encourage others, because you never know who's listening. There may be somebody right now who's going through something that they feel like they're not worth anything. Yeah. But they are.
They are.
I was trash. I was living in my car, hooked on meth, and then I ended up with my wife, who was never drank, never, there was, she was perfect, and I was like the exact opposite. Yeah. And she's never had any kids, never been married. I was the exact opposite. She had never been arrested. I had a felony, all these things, and God God knew what she needed and what I needed and put
Yeah.
it together. And that's how he works.
That's how he works.
He lines things up. And sometimes it feels like he's not working or not moving, but
Yeah,
he is. He always is.
He always is.
So what can you tell as an encouragement for somebody to come forward and speak out? Or if they have been hurt and they've been hiding it and not sharing any to get help?
Yeah. So I would just say, start with somebody, find someone you can trust. I mean, call me, Facebook me, message me, find a stranger, find someone that you love or that you can trust and just tell your secrets. It's kind of like trying to explain the head knowledge to the heart knowledge thing.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do that. I can't explain how it's going to help you to do that. But I can promise you, the second you break the silence, Satan loses his grip on you. Yep. And every time you share one more detail to one more person, he loses more and more and more of that grip on you, and you become free. And that freedom, especially when you get that freedom in Christ, there is nothing like it.
That's
nothing.
Awesome. So now you said you could find this on Amazon or anywhere you want, you can find it.
Yeah, Amazon. The normal. I think anywhere really, but anywhere where you can buy books. Kind of because it was released right before COVID. I haven't had a chance to really promote it in bookstores, so I don't have bookstores other than the publishing house that published it, Redemption Press. They have a bookstore. It's sold there, but that's in Washington.
I'll make sure to put the Amazon link down in the show notes.
Awesome.
And,
yeah.
So do you have any closing statements you would like to encourage or say to anybody?
Just if you don't have a heart understanding of who Jesus Christ is, I promise you he loves you. There is nothing that you have ever done that is too big for his grace, too ugly for what he can do to protect you and forgive you from. Kind of what I say often is no matter what's been done to you or what you've done to yourself, there is hope and forgiveness in Jesus Christ. And he is the healer of all healers. He can truly take every piece of your ugly. And maybe you're not going to be on a podcast or write a book. And I don't want to scare you like, if I go forward and tell my story, I'm going to be doing this. Like maybe I would have never thought that 20 years ago. But here I am, what an honor. But it's just about being obedient and getting that forgiveness and that healing. And God is so gracious. You just have to cry out to him. There's power in the name. So.
I like it. Yeah. All right, well, thank y'all. And thank you, BJ, for coming in today and talking about your book and telling your story. That's an awesome story.
Thanks.
That is the perfect picture of God's grace and mercy.
Thank you.
And
it's an honor.
Appreciate you coming on. Once again, you can check all of our episodes out, and everything will be cited in the show notes below. Go to faithandfailures.com to listen to every episode, and also Faith and Failures on YouTube to watch this episode. See y'all next week.